So, Dave, we got another author on the show today. And this one is not just an author. He's a famous attorney in Chicago, co-founder of a very prestigious law firm in the city.
So he could sue us, is what you're saying.
And he could represent us.
Okay.
You know what? It could go either way. After he retired recently, he sat down and he wrote his first novel. He hit it out of the park. It takes place here in our favorite city in the world, Chicago, Illinois. And that's really what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about Chicago history. Today's guest is named Bob Conlon, and it's time to get him on the show.
The following is a Tony Lasano podcast, an Opie show on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network. This is the Minutia Man Celebrity Interview with Rick and Dave.
Bob, how are you?
Fantastic, guys. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for joining us today. I know this book is a novel, but it is definitely based on a true story. And so before we get into the many historical events that are covered in the book, why don't you just tell us about the inspiration that beset you to write this book in the first place? You like that?
Beset?
We're talking to an author here. We gotta dial it up.
No. I am the last person alive that actually met my grandfather, on whom this book is about, and his, just as a youngster, hearing him tell stories, hearing my parents and cousins tell stories about him, it was always just fascinating. I could hardly wait to visit him and my grandmother and just hear these stories. The Irish, they love to just go on and on and on and tell story after story. And they're quite good at it, by the way.
No, for sure.
And he just had such a fascinating life that intersected with so many important Chicago historical events. As I got older, I figured I needed to put this down. I needed to tell his story, because once I go, poof, all these memories go. Some of my kids know a little bit here and there. And he was a prolific writer. He wrote not books or novels or short stories. He wrote letters to friends and his wife. And he also wrote his beautiful poetry, some of which is in the book. And so I was able to use that, plus my memory and interviewing everybody that still is alive, that knew him and talked to him, and just created a chronology of events and thought it would be a great story. And the real inspiration is I wanted to do it for the family. I want my grandkids to read this when they're old enough to read and be proud of from where they came. I think all of us, certainly all of us on the phone here on the show, we all owe a tremendous amount to our ancestors and the sacrifices they made. We all have stories, and thank God they were tough, resilient, adventurous, and came over here to the United States and made a life better for their family than that they had.
Donald Trump's on the other line right now. We want you to reiterate that to Donald Trump, please.
There you go.
What I loved about this book, and again, you captured Chicago so well, but certainly the 1800s Chicago, right, and the reputation for being a really rough and tumble city. But boy, talk about your book, and there's the red light district and the smallpox and the brothels, but let's be honest, there was no permit parking back then.
Yeah.
So it was, I would take the smallpox over permit parking anyways. Right. But I love, Chicago is a character in this book, and I just loved everything about it. It must have been fun to research and just kind of put yourself, as a writer, we know you have to put yourself into the place, So talk to us a little bit about late 1800s Chicago, and what it was like.
Well, thank you for your nice comments, David. I appreciate it.
What'd I say?
Really
I don't usually say anything nice. What did I say?
I really wanted to, for the factual part, the nonfiction part, the historical events, some of which were, terrible tragedies. The Chicago fires discussed, the Eastland disaster, the Iroquois Theater fire. I just felt an obligation to tell it as accurate as I could possibly do. Just really to honor the victims and the families and just to tell the story right. And so I spent a fair bit of time researching it all. And you are absolutely right, David. The 1880s, 1890s of Chicago, I mean, I could have guessed what they were like, but drilling down and researching it, it was unbelievable. And the city, as a character, just so proud of Chicago after this exercise of really drilling so far down on what was going on back then after the Chicago fire and how they rebuilt and how the community just rallied around one another and helped the victims and helped make it one of the world-class cities and just never give up. And just amazing how the leaders of the city and the citizens, they just refused to give up no matter what was thrown at them and try to build better and make the city what it is today. Now, the 1880s, it was still, the rebuild was still going on, and it was going from a city that was important because of its geographical center part of the country location and kind of a hub for all sorts of things moving from east to west into a destination. And so in the 1880s, it was just so dangerous, and there was so much building going on. And that was the demise of, again, my grandfather, who's Tim Conlon in this book. His dad perished because he was working on the railroad, working 16, 18-hour days, 7 days a week, because they were relying on the railroad to build the city back, get the garbage out, and get the new materials in. And there was a terrible train accident, and he perished. But there was also, it was a wide open town, and I didn't realize, I knew my grandfather was in the red light district where he lived at the age of 8 in 1885, and I also understood it was south of the Loop. I researched and found it was an area called, and I have a map to prove it in the book, because I was just so shocked to see it. It's called Little Cheyenne, because it was like the Old West. There were thousands of prostitutes and bars and bare-knuckle fighting and sluggers, they would call them, whatever the heck that is, and drug dealers and all the bad stuff. That's where you would go. And people who would come in from out of town, including during the Columbia Exposition, they, of course, some of them would visit the red light district, and it was so famous. And again, like you mentioned about the smallpox and tuberculosis, and then later the Spanish flu, it was just a wide open town, a great town, a fun town, but an extraordinarily dangerous town.
Yeah. Without giving away what happens to the main character in the story, is his story weaves in and out of some pretty important historical moments that you've already mentioned in Chicago history.
Sure.
Let's start with one that I've actually done some research on, because it is it involves two Chicago Cubs players. I don't know if you know about this.
Oh, God. Here we go again with the Cubs. Every frickin' conversation goes back to the Cubs.
But there were two Cub players, ex-Cub players at the time, who were there at the Iroquois Theater fire and who were heroes and saved a bunch of people. Charlie Gilbert and John Houseman were their names. You can find those in every Cub ever. Also available on Eckhart's Press. But anyway, the Iroquois...
Don't invite Rick to any parties, Bob, because all he goes on and on and on.
The Iroquois Theater fire, a lot of modern-day Chicagoans really don't know anything about that, but that was one of the worst tragedies ever.
Yeah, it was just so tragic and so preventable. It was. I came away after researching it and trying to get to, being a lawyer, to kind of look to how the heck did this happen? And of course, as my wife always says, you always look to who's at fault,
Right.
and it was extraordinarily.
Who put this empty milk carton in the refrigerator? Who's at fault, right?
Bingo, exactly, David. Yeah. Now we are talking about it happened December 30th, 1903, and the Iroquois Theater was located at West Randolph Street between State and Dearborn. Okay, there's trying to remember what theater's there now. And it was, again, sadly, it was the matinee and during Christmas vacation, so a lot of the people that were in attendance for that show were little kids who were off of school. And it was delay after delay after delay of opening because of various construction and code violations and getting the right certificates. And it was a showcase. It was newspapers in New York previewing it were, anytime we got a compliment from New York, it was like, wow, because they really know what they're talking about in New York. And they were saying what a beautiful, one of the most beautiful theaters in the United States. And it was just gorgeous. And I have a couple pictures before and after in the book. Just gorgeous. And so when it finally opened, there was a rush for tickets, and it was oversold, ridiculously oversold. There should have been no standing room only. Can you imagine a theater where you're watching a live play where there's just people packed in the back rows? And I mean packed, and kids sitting and adults sitting in the aisles on the stairs. It's just insane. And fast forward, 575 people were killed that day. And it was due to a fire that just went up out of nowhere. There was a spark, and the actors tried to calm people. They're all sitting there watching this before their very eyes and thinking, what's going on here? It's clearly not part of the play. And just through a series of ridiculous events, including they tried to pull down the fire retardant curtain, essentially, and that probably would have knocked it right out. Because back then they used, candles to light the stage, where the actors would actually light. There was no electricity. Well, there was some, but not used on the stage. So they had this fire retardant curtain, and they pulled it down. It was snagged and didn't work properly. Yeah. And then people started to panic and rush the doors, and the doors. Back then, since then, they've changed the law in part because of this. They pulled, instead of pushing out an exit door, going from inside to outside, pushing out, which makes perfect sense, they pulled in. So people rushed the doors and then tried to pull the doors open, but the weight of the people that just, 30 people at a time, just rushing an exit door, if they could find it, and they were horribly lit. They were sometimes covered with curtains so you couldn't see it. So if you were lucky enough to find a doorway, you better have been the first person there, because after that, it was impossible to open the door. And it turns out that a lot of this, politicians, and I'm sure this will make you guys fall out of your chair in Chicago, looked the other way, and again, there was some pressure to get the Iroquois Theater open because of the delays and the investors. You had never heard this story before, right?
Yeah.
And so they looked the other way, possibly took some money, and allowed it to open with all these violations. And sadly,
oh my God, yeah,
that many people, 544 people, died on that day, and a lot of people died after that from smoke inhalation. They don't have the right, they don't have accurate numbers for that, but a lot of people estimate it was well in excess of 600 ultimately died.
Yeah,
That's just horrific. And as terrible as that tragedy was, there's another one that's perhaps even worse a few years later, and this happens to be the 110th anniversary of the Eastland disaster. So kind of tell us, bring the room down even a little bit more, Bob. Tell us about the
after
Eastland.
that tapper of the story.
Who put him on? He's a...
So I wish I could tell you that the Eastland resulted in something the exact opposite, but no, it was another horrible tragedy, and that happened in 1915. July 24th will be the 110th anniversary. And what fascinated, kind of like what you were saying, Rick, about the Iroquois Theater, Chicagoans, you ask 100 Chicagoans, maybe 20 know about the Iroquois because they've been on a ghost tour or something silly or read about it, and maybe 50 know about the Eastland, but nothing other than wasn't that a ship that
was
a lot of
around
people
the time
drowned.
of the Titanic or something like that, and that's about all they know, right?
Precisely.
Yeah.
And I think I read just about everything there is to read about the Eastland, and again, a very avoidable, tragic event. And what it was the 5th annual Western Electric Family Picnic, and back then there was in Cicero there was the Hawthorne Works for the Western Electric Company. They were the manufacturing arm of Illinois Bell, and they employed 20,000 employees. It just a massive operation, because at the time that was the computers of the day. Phones were just
high tech,
exploding, and sadly Hawthorne Works doesn't exist anymore, other than the beautiful water tower. They kept that, but at the time it was just a massive operation. Anyways, this Hawthorne Club, it was for the Western Electric non-executive employees, and they would do this. This was the 5th annual, and they would leave from the Chicago River right near Clark Street Bridge, and they were on the south side, the south bank, and there were 5 boats, because this year they were in 1915, there were going to be 7,000 people going over to Michigan City, Indiana for a picnic. And they did it right. They had bands on the boat and food and drinks, and it was a very festive event. And it got, again, being the 5th one, it was very popular by then. They initially there was a couple thousand people went, and then by 1915 there were 7,000. The Eastland was one of 5 boats that were to transport all these people over to Michigan City. It's about a 38-mile journey as the crow flies, about 2 hours. And because the Eastland, which was chartered a couple years in a row before that, was the slowest one. It was just a big, giant, slow-moving, poorly built, poorly designed passenger ship. And they said, well, let's let the Eastland go first. Otherwise, the poor people that are stuck on that one, they'll be really late and miss the fireworks or whatever's going on in Michigan City. So, anyways, the idea was board them first. People lined up at 6:30 in the morning. It was a rainy Saturday. But it was very festive as people got on the boat. It was tied to the dock. And keep in mind, the Chicago River at that time, and probably now still, about 20 feet deep where the Eastland was sitting. And 20 with the gangplank, it was about 20 feet from the wharf, and it was tied up, okay? And people started boarding, about 100 people at a time, starting around 6:45. The idea was they would depart at 7:30 in the morning. And there's a ragtime band, just to envision it, and people are dancing. It's early, but this is their big event. These are hardworking, blue-collar people. This is their big family event, and 2,500 people went on. They actually the maximum capacity of the Eastland guys was 2,500 people, but because children, they counted them as a half a person for the count because they're less weight. They actually had 2,573 people on board. And as they boarded, I can go into great detail, but I'll just kind of give you the Reader's Digest version here. As they boarded, as you would imagine, the weight shifted a little bit to the right. And the problem with the Eastland, it was designed by a guy who only designed cargo ships. And they're designed usually to hold loads deep in the hold of the ship. And he had never done a passenger boat, and it didn't have a keel, which is the spine of a boat that helps with stability. Most, cargo, or actually most passenger ships have a keel, and they have a ballast system. And it was his one and only passenger ship that he designed. And it was designed originally for 500 people maximum capacity. And due to economics and trying to make a buck, they retrofitted it 5 times from 1905 when it was first built to 1915 to increase the capacity to 2,500. And in other words, how the heck that happened, I really couldn't. I just don't think it was regulated. Anyways, as they boarded, it listed to the starboard side, toward the wharf. The right-hand side, as you're looking forward, is the starboard. Started to list, and so they moved people, move all the way over to the river side on the port, and so that stabilized it. But then, as people came on, they all wanted a better view on the river side, and so passengers started lining up on the port side, and it started to list, and just really never recovered. And the captain tried to do a handful of things. I go into painstaking detail there, but ultimately it was a 60-degree list, and then finally just got into a roll that didn't stop. It was kind of rocking back and forth, but mostly a list to the port side. Ultimately, let's see if I can get the quote up. Carl Sandburg at the time was writing for a local newspaper called the International Socialist Review. I don't know anything about that, but he wrote, "Like a dead jungle monster shot through the heart, the Eastland rolled over and perished." And when that happened, people got catapulted into the river. Nobody knew how to swim. Well, not nobody, but most people, believe it or not, didn't know how to swim in 1915. And they had no life jackets on. They weren't required to put life jackets on at the time. And another quote that is just terrifying from the Chicago Herald: "In an instant, the surface of the water was black with struggling, crying, frightened, drowning humanity. We infants floated about like corks." At the end of the day, 844 people drowned and died. And the Titanic, which was in 1905, had 829 passengers. Now, they did have a crew of almost 700, so more people died in the Titanic. But as far as just a pure passenger count, more people died on the Eastland, again, in 20 feet of water. And the Lusitania, which 10 weeks before the Eastland disaster, got torpedoed and sunk in the Atlantic, killing 785 passengers. Now, they're all tragic situations, obviously, but most people have heard of the Lusitania, most people have heard of the Titanic, not many about the Eastland. And the reason is, I'm convinced, and Ted Wachholtz, who's the president of the Eastland Disaster Historical Society, was quoted as saying, because there was nobody rich or famous on the boat, and blue-collar working stiffs. And people were sad and outpouring around the world, for sure, but they were quickly forgotten, sadly. And just one more point on this, guys. Why it happened, poor design, of course, but because of the Titanic, Woodrow Wilson signed a Lifeboats for All law that went into effect just within that year, I think it was March of 1915, that required lifeboats for 75% of the maximum capacity. So they went from having 6 lifeboats to 11, and these things are massive, and a bunch of rafts and life jackets for all that were stored, and those things are 1,000, 2,000 pounds of throw. And so because of that law on the Titanic, which was designed to save people, it made a poorly designed ship even less stable.
Yeah.
And that's why it was top heavy and quickly, with that many people on it that day, toppled over.
Yeah, I mean, it's an unbelievable story. I mean, the main character in your book is, just happens to be there at some of these big events in Chicago history, which, obviously you're a very good storyteller, and you can tell by listening to you, but
Thanks.
It's an Irish book, too, right? I love the blurb that Brendan Sullivan wrote for the book jacket. It says, take an orphan whose childhood reads like Charles Dickens, set his essentially true story in the epic and tragic boomtown of early 20th century Chicago. Share the amazing account of that young Irish-American boy's rise to manhood and success in such a dynamic, turbulent city. Sprinkle in a little Irish magic. And you've got the Celtic Knot, or Celtic Knot. Bob Conlon's narrative of his grandfather's life is told with love, humor, charm, and more than a few page-turning tales of adventure. And here's my favorite line. A work of nonfiction with a little poetic license and a wink of imagination thrown in. How very Irish. True, right?
Yeah, thanks for reading that. Yeah, I love that, what Brendan came up with. A beautiful little note that he prepared, and I couldn't have said it any better, for sure. Yeah, no, it is very just that time when so many immigrants came from Europe and everywhere into the United States for better opportunities. The Irish came over in the 1840s, 1850s, went to New York, went to Chicago and elsewhere, because of the potato famine. They were literally starving to death and had to get the heck out of there. And they just, they basically, if you can put yourself in their shoes, just thinking of your little neighborhood where your friends and family and loved ones are, and all the stuff that you've accumulated your entire life, all at once you got to stick it in a steamer box or a big piece of luggage, and say, see ya, and leave forever to the land of opportunity. And they held on to that culture because they missed it so much. And it's not just unique to Irish, it's German, Polish, French, whatever, Italian. And they all wanted to, that's why you had all these ghettos. They wanted to be surrounded by people that they knew and loved and appreciated their culture. And that's why you had these little pockets. Oh, that's an Italian neighborhood. Mm-hmm. That's why it happened that way. And so that culture they embraced. They didn't want to lose it. It was the kind of their lifeline to the land that they left and loved, and it was handed down. And so the culture just it shaped people, and it shaped how they believed. It shaped how they approached things. And so, yes, very much a story about Irish culture and how it survived over here in the United States. But again, it's you could tell a very similar story about a German immigrant.
Well, let's not forget about perhaps the most important character of your book, and that's Shecky Silverstein, right? Shecky Silverstein is the... right? I mean, Shecky...
Yeah. How did you like Shecky Silverstein?
I love Shecky.
He's a fictionalized character based on a true story, though. I mean, that very much happened, but how did you like him?
I loved any book that has a Shecky Silverstein in, I'm buying it. And for all of our listeners out there,
Yeah. And he's opening at Zany's this week.
Right. With some crepla soup, it's...
Well, one of my friends whose who's Jewish, who read the book already, he described him as a schmuck. And I said, that's a perfect word to use there.
Yeah. I mean, but not a, kind of a fun schmuck.
lovable schmuck.
Yeah, right?
Lovable
I mean,
Of course. Yeah, he was hitting on my grandmother, who was attractive at the time. So what, you know?
One of the dangers about writing about your own family, like you've done here, is that the rest of the family might not appreciate it. And I wrote a novel called Back in the DDR, which was about my dad and my family, and they hated it. My family hated it. I mean,
really?
the readers liked it, but my family was like, well, that one story is not true. Joe did it instead of Fred, and it was in 1974, not in 1975, and they didn't go to that school; they went to this school, and it was a novel, but that's why I wrote it as a novel, so that there was freedom. And your book is a novel too. How has your family responded to it? It seems like better than mine. And can we trade families?
Yeah, fortunately, yes. I really I really did spend, and it was fun, believe me. I really did spend a lot of time with my cousins who are now in their 80s. My mother, who passed away recently, she passed away at 94, and loved her in-laws. So I just spent a lot of time just sitting down taking notes. Just tell me a story, any story. It doesn't have to be an interesting. Just what do you remember? And so I did try to be accurate. Now I did fill in a couple spots just to make the story make sense, where the little wink of Irish magic or whatever Brendan called it, because we weren't there, right?
And there's got to be a narrative to it, Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. Like when he falls in love with a prostitute when he was a young man living in the red light district. Okay, not a spoil, kind of a spoiler alert, I guess, but. I didn't know how that would be taken because that was fictionalized, but I think, I just, a young man at that age, living, he was sweeping up floors at houses of ill repute, as my grandmother would call them, just so he could get a sandwich and not starve to death and in the winters, be able to sleep on the floor. He was surrounded by a bunch of women. What do you think's going to happen?
Yeah, right.
And so that was the thing. That was kind of a, if you think of a little gauge where it's hitting red, like, uh-oh, danger. But no, they got a big kick out of it, and they said, yeah, I'm sure that's what happened. So I was happy it was well received, that little fictional part of it.
Well, plug away, Bob. Where can you get the book? Tell how great your publishers were. Just plug away.
Oh my God, I have the greatest team that got this thing across the finish line. I am so happy.
Shecky Silverstein is in marketing.
Shecky Silverstein and Captain Peterson from the SS Eastland. No, Rick Camphor and David Stern, who I'm talking to right now in Eckhart's Press, and that's where you can find my book. If you just go to their website, which I'll let you guys spell it properly, just in case.
I believe it's ECKHARTZ press.com. And that's where you can find it. It's selling quite well, by the way, Bob. People are liking this book. Yeah,
I'm getting great reviews, and that's
the price of admission right there. Yeah, that's the price of admission.
You guys are both authors. And this is the first time for me, and you guys know me well enough. I really hope I don't brag ever, please don't take it this way. But you put yourself out there. You write down a story. Yep. I don't know what people are going to think.
Of course.
And you get somebody nice enough to spend $20 to buy a book, and then actually read it, and then give you feedback, and it's really positive. And I'm telling you, I got the nicest notes from people, including a lot of people that I don't know that well, or certainly don't know my family, and they're just like, wow, couldn't put it down. And so that is just such a rewarding, that you're able to provide entertainment, joy, fun for somebody, out there reading the book. I can't tell you how all that hard work really paid off. But back to you guys. Great. I mean,
yeah. Back to us. Tell us more about it.
Back to you. It was such. For example, when I had in my mind what I wanted the book cover to look like, because as Rick has told me, people do judge a book by its cover.
Yes, they
it's
do.
important, and I kind of had this, let's do this, and this, and you try to slap it together, and I had it in my mind, and then to see it come to life, and it's such a beautiful looking cover that, you guys just did an amazing job with that, and just so fun to work with. I can't thank you guys enough, really.
Well, back at you. You've been wonderful to work with, and
thanks for having an open bar at the launch party.
which I couldn't go
that.
because my damn twins were recovering from jaw surgery. Well, when's the next book coming out?
Yeah, that's the next.
Yeah, we're working on it.
Well, Bob, thanks for doing this interview, and thanks for doing the book.
Yeah,
and I hope that it continues to touch people the way it has so far, and keep telling those stories because you're good at it.
Yeah, and drive home
Well,
from
I
Michigan.
really appreciate it, fellas. So good. Always love talking to you, and it's an honor to be on your podcast, and I really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks a million.
Thanks, Bob.
Take it easy. Bye-bye.
All right, see ya. Bye-bye.
There he goes.
He's a great,
Bob Conlon. He's
great guy. Just a great guy.
I'd take 100 of those guys.
Oh my God!
Right. I mean,
and like you had mentioned, and I think certainly this book is indicative of that. He's a great storyteller.
He
And
is.
it just
he is.
So that was great.
All right, and it's called Celtic Knot,
Yeah.
Knot, and you can find it at Eckhart's Press. All right, we have people to thank.
Yeah.
We need to thank
Bob for writing the book.
Yeah.
Thanks, Bob, for jumping on.
we need to thank also Tony Lasano,
Yeah, Tony,
our
thanks for producing.
executive producer. The distributor is Ed Silla.
Ed.
It's Radio Misfits Podcast Network. Great Talk Radio isn't dead. Just moved to a better place, radiomisfits.com. And we'll be back again next week.
Maybe. We'll see.
No, we will be. We got someone booked. You better
Okay.
show up. We'll be back next week with another episode of
Minutia Men Celebrity Interview.
The proceeding was a presentation of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network. Find our other great shows on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and at radiomisfits.com. Thank you.
This has been a presentation of Opie Productions.
Tony, can you shut up?